Friday the 13th. I remember it's one of the worst days of my life because we had to go in. We didn't have enough money to make payroll. So we had to let go of every single employee. Um,
One thing I want to point out that I think every entrepreneur needs to do. I think Rithika, my co-founder, is on the call, where even when we started the company, every loan was manually done. Every payment was manually done. Every loan doc, every schedule, everything. And I think that it's common to see successful businesses do that because you really know every single detail of the customer journey to the most granular level. And I feel that without, I'm not saying that you need to do everything manual forever, but by doing a lot of these things manual first, it like embeds in who you are, how the business works. Walk me through, because like I know that there's been a lot of innovation within the company, but prior to 2020, let's talk before COVID, when you're trying new things, because consumers are very finicky, especially when it comes to gaming. There's some expectation of fantasy sports, these interfaces, even though there's in direct competition with FanDuel or DraftKings, there's still an expectation of the marketplace of the experience, and getting consumer products great has so much to do with understanding the nuance of every button, every color, every detail, and going through that process. And some of it is, I was actually lecturing at Stanford last week, and one of the other professors and lecturers was talking about the human element of understanding it and you experiencing it. Now that so many companies are using AI, they're starting to lose that touch with the actual creation, product market fit, and how seeing the consumer. Can you talk a little bit about that iteration process and how you and the team were like actually involved directly with every single detail and how the innovation cycle goes?
yeah, I think there's something to that for sure. Like I used to, in the early days, our settling engine didn't exist. So I used to by hand go look at the scores and settle all the lineups. I understood the importance of doing it immediately after the game. And so like my Sunday nights for the first couple of months or any day there was football running was just on my computer. I would not go anywhere without my computer. Even if I was at a friend's house, I'd be settling lineups. Because if you wait until the next morning, you're getting customer support tickets about what the hell's going on, where's my money, etc. So it built that culture of like, there's all these important parts in the customer journey that matter that eventually when we do automate it, we got to really focus on. I've answered every single customer support ticket on Intercom in the early days. Um, it just helps you develop a real understanding of what matters to the customer and the experience. I will also say, like, we didn't do a great job of, and this is me being transparent, of some of that quality and consideration in the early days. It was, like you said, a complete sprint to try to find product market fit and raise money and figure out how to, navigate around the regulations, etc. We were very early on the adoption curve. And so I, frankly, who was doing a lot of the development at that time, had a huge luxury of shipping bugs and having very understanding users. And some of the stuff that we did around that really helped our case too. Like I was in touch with a lot of our VIPs, so I could easily just shoot them a message like, "Hey, I'm sorry about that bug. Yada yada. Here's a free lineup." It built some of that trust and like that understanding with users in the early days when maybe you're not as buttoned up as you need to be and you're in much more of an experimentation phase. But those personal connections and doing things that don't scale, which Paul Graham and Reid Hoffman have talked about a bunch, there's so much value to doing that stuff and not over engineering or over investing in the wrong direction early on. You just need to figure out signal, and then you figure out what the important things are to productize and automate. And I would do that 10 out of 10 times. Like, I think proving the business model to our early investors and to ourselves and getting to where we did and establishing that early lead is way more valuable than not shipping a couple of bugs that ultimately we were able to get past, or the app would go down at critical points because, we were cutting corners in those early days. It was just a limited resourcing thing that we had to do. Um, so yeah, I 100% buy into the do things that don't scale narrative.
So 2020,
Yep.
the entire, obviously, at least I felt, looking at the numbers and what was going on, the business model is working,
Yep.
starting to scale. Hey, this is going to be really, really exciting. Very different from the lending industry, but very, very similar. A lot of models, order of large number type math. You got to be really, really good at dialing in the underwriting and kind of how the whole ecosystem, providing credit, creating the incentives, creating the engagement. And then COVID hits. And the entire fundamental premise of the business model is obviously sports, and there's no sports. So walk us through. And I remember investing in the rounds in 2020, and that really then ends up being like making sure that you have, in my opinion, one of my investors calls it SNAP, strictly no asshole policy, and finding good partners to help bridge the gap in crisis during that time. I've always believed in Adam. I've always believed in you and the business, which is why I thought it was a no-brainer to invest in 2020 and invest again in 2020 again. But on the other side, not so easy. Walk us through kind of like the mindset of 2020 and what to do during that time frame.
Yeah, we had about 20 full-time employees and 30 contractors, and we're getting ready to go do our Series A raise at like a 30 million valuation in February of 2020. Terrible timing. And I remember sitting there watching Rudy Gobert on that Wednesday. He was doing the press conference and touched all the mics. And yeah, the seasons got shut down, the next day, obviously, one by one. That Friday was Friday the 13th. I remember it's one of the worst days of my life because we had to go in. We didn't have enough money to make payroll. So we had to let go of every single employee, literally every single person except one that we hired that Monday, who is Adam Blaschke, our lead architect. So he's the one person that stayed on salary. Adam and I obviously not taking salary. Some of the founding members stuck around. And it was 5 of us. We battened down the hatches and just what said Adam. And frankly, huge kudos to Adam through that period, who had been through enough periods of just that sort of thing in his career, where he was able to keep us even keel and said, look, sports are going to come back around. We just need to figure out how to bridge the gap. Let's figure out how to offer whatever's going on right now, which was esports, etc. So his creativity and tenacity. And at that time, like, I was so distraught. I was like, my honest reaction was like, Adam, shut up. Like, don't call me. And like, I just need some time to figure out what's going on. But 100% credit to him for keeping me, him, Dylan, some of the other early members of the team, like, focused and just saying, like, how do we just keep the lights on? Sports will come back around. The NBA did their bubble, etc. It forced us to become very lean. It was honestly a blessing in disguise. We came out much stronger on the other end of COVID, and the numbers just started skyrocketing when NBA, NFL, and NHL came back around that fall. The whole like pent up demand phrase that was used during quarantine, it applied to sports fans for sure. So our numbers just skyrocketed. I'm sure you remember, JP. Like,
Yeah.
we were forced to raise money at suppressed valuations during that period, and really appreciate the partners like yourself who came in and supported. But